Mitigating climate change is quite crucial, and the wine industry can play a big role in reducing carbon emission. I am here today with Meagan Littlejohn, Program Manager for Sustainable Winegrowing New Zealand. Meagan, New Zealand has set quite an ambitious goal, meaning you want to be net zero emission by 2050. First of all, can you tell us what does it mean to be net zero?
Yeah, so for our industry, we've defined the term net zero as reducing our emissions as much as possible. So really focusing on eliminating emissions wherever we can, ideally up to about 90% from our baseline emissions, and then using carbon removals for that last 10% that we'll probably never be able to eliminate completely. So when they balance out the reductions and the removals, then you get to net zero.
So how do you get there? Because it's not easy. It requires transition. What have you put in place to help producers get to that goal?
Yeah, so for the New Zealand wine industry, we have put together a plan for how we will achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So we've called it our roadmap to net zero. And that's essentially our industry strategy for the targets and the milestones that we need to meet between now and 2050. And it outlines some key emissions reduction opportunities for both vineyards and wineries.
Can you maybe go over what is included in the roadmap?
Yeah, so within the roadmap, there's really 5 key opportunities that we'll be focusing on between now and 2050, and that will help us reduce our emissions as much as possible. So one principle is maximizing energy efficiency. So there's always going to be tasks that require energy to be used. So really putting practices in place that means that you are working as efficiently as possible. And of course, when it's time to buy a new machinery, for example, whether it's in the vineyard or the winery, trying to select those machines that we know are more energy efficient than what you were using before. So that's the first principle. The second one is looking at moving away from diesel as much as possible. Diesel is the number one source of emissions for vineyards. And right now, most of the machines that we can use in the industry are diesel powered. But there's a lot of innovation in this space. There's a lot of new technology coming out. So when we are able to use some of those new options, choosing ones that are not reliant on diesel and other fossil fuels, that's a really important principle, especially in the vineyard. The third principle is decarbonizing electricity. So we are really lucky. Within New Zealand, the electricity grid is already very green. Already about 85% of all electricity in New Zealand is generated from renewable energy sources. So we need to get that to 100% renewable, and the New Zealand government actually has targets in place to get there around 2040. So that's a really important principle as well. And then there are some other things you can do, for example, in the winery using solar panels and generating solar electricity on your actual site. So a lot of wineries are already doing that, which is great. The fourth principle is a really, really key one, and it's all about our Scope 3 emissions. So we've called it innovating the value chain, and it's basically working with those key suppliers that are a part of our carbon footprint. So things like packaging suppliers and transport suppliers, really putting the pressure on them to provide information about their emissions, because they're a part of our footprint, of course, and then trying to align ourselves with suppliers who also have similar targets to reduce their emissions and ideally achieve net zero as well. So that will take a lot of work over time, but that's a really important piece because Scope 3 emissions are the largest source of emissions for the wine industry. And then that fifth principle, like I mentioned at the start, we want to focus on reduction, but that remaining 10% that we won't be able to eliminate completely, that's when we want to look at carbon removals. So the ideal option for carbon removals would be to increasing the potential of our vineyard area to sequester more carbon, and that will help us offset those remaining emissions. So like you said, a lot of work to be done, and it won't be easy, of course. It does need to be a lot of practice change involved, but those are the 5 key activities and principles that we'll be focusing on.
I have a couple of questions for you. The first one is, you mentioned a lot of practices that need to be put in place that are quite costly. If I'm a producer and I need to change my tractor to go for an electric tractor, there's an investment required. So do you support growers in that regard?
From the industry body perspective, unfortunately, we don't really have funding that we can kind of make available for producers right now. There is some government funding available in New Zealand, though. There's a government agency called the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority. The acronym is EECA, and they do support some of these projects. So if you have a very specific activity or initiative that you want to put in place to reduce your energy use in particular, they will often match the funds. So if you put up X amount of dollars, they'll also put in that amount, and that can help you actually have the funds available for those sort of investments. So yeah, cost can definitely be a barrier, especially for smaller producers. So I think that's why, of course, new technology, new machinery is so important, but really looking at even just the tasks that you're doing in a vineyard, for example, or what you're doing in the winery, and trying to make those as efficient as possible. So we've really been highlighting for our vineyards, for example, to reduce their tractor passes as much as possible. So even if you're still using the same machine that you've had on hand for many years, if you can eliminate even just one tractor pass a season, if every vineyard in New Zealand did that, that would be a savings of about 250,000 liters of diesel every single year. So just trying to think a little bit differently about the tasks that you're doing. If there's anything that's really not essential, just not doing it, and combining passes as much as possible as well. So I think that's the best place to start. And then as you can purchase new machinery and when there's new technology available, moving to that eventually.
And as you were mentioning, you need to track. Once you track what you're doing, it's easier to put in place a strategy to reduce. You cannot change what you don't measure. And I think New Zealand has been really, really good at doing that. And I think New Zealand is, without a doubt, a model to look at for other countries. I don't know any other countries who've had such an ambitious goal. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. And I know we can find some more information about the roadmap on New Zealand wine growers. So I invite people to go there. Thank you so much, Meagan.
No worries. Thanks, Michelle.